I remember that feeling. I mean, I remember it in my bones. The kind of exhaustion that isn't just about being tired from working shifts. It's this deep mental drain, a constant hum of financial pressure that just never, ever shuts off. And when you're in that state, debt stops being a number. It becomes chaos. It's a weight that you carry around everywhere. This is the story of how I stopped running from that chaos and decided to build a system to control it instead. You know, the natural reaction to that kind of pressure is usually one of two things, right? You either panic or you just try to ignore it. You either stare right into it and get completely overwhelmed, or you pretend it's not happening. And for a while, I got it. I understood the avoidance part. When you're that tired from shift work, the last thing on earth you have energy for is confronting some huge, complicated financial mess. Every official-looking letter, every phone call from a number you don't recognize, it just adds another layer of chaos. But here's the thing about avoidance. It's a short-term fix with massive long-term costs. The problem doesn't just vanish, it gets bigger. So I made a different choice. I decided to stop reacting and start acting. I chose to build a system. And this wasn't born out of some sudden burst of motivation. It was born out of pure necessity. This is the blueprint for that system, a way to force order onto chaos. Okay, so let's walk through this blueprint together step by step. First, we're going to look at the reality of how debt actually escalates. Second, how you can take control of your communication with the bank. Third, we'll demystify the legal enforcement process. It's not as scary as it sounds. Fourth, the nitty-gritty of negotiating a real formal agreement. And finally, we'll see how all these pieces fit together into a system you can actually use, a blueprint for control. The very first step in creating any kind of order is to understand the playbook of your opponent. In this case, the bank. See, banks don't run on emotion. They run on procedure. And that procedure, that's your roadmap. So what's really important to see here is just how predictable this whole thing is. The moment a payment is missed, a clock starts ticking. Around day 10, you'll get a polite little letter. Then between days 10 and 30, the phone calls start. By day 60, the tone changes. It gets serious, a formal warning about legal action. And then, after about 90 days, that's usually when they pass it on for judicial recovery. Just knowing this timeline, it takes away the element of surprise. The chaos of not knowing what's next is suddenly replaced by the order of a process you can actually anticipate. All right, so now we get to the first real principle of taking back control. Once you know their process, you have to control the arena where you engage with them, and that arena is communication. This was a game changer. I just stopped taking their calls. A phone call serves the bank, not you. Think about it. There's no record of what was said, what was promised, or what was threatened. It's an environment that's high on emotion and really low on accountability. But written communication, actual letters, formal emails, that flips the entire dynamic. It creates a permanent, undeniable record. It forces you to be calm, to be factual, and it gives you a legally defensible paper trail of every single interaction. And check this out. This isn't my opinion. This is a fundamental rule from their own playbook. This quote is from a major bank's own internal process. They only have to give you a formal written answer if you submit a formal written complaint. So by refusing to talk on the phone, you force the entire conversation onto official, documented ground. You're now operating inside a system of record. And this is so crucial to understand. Documentation isn't just about defense. It's an offensive strategy. Every single letter you send is another brick in the wall that you are building. It isn't passive record keeping. It is the active creation of the official story, a story that you control and that you can use in any negotiation down the line. Sooner or later, the process might escalate to the legal stage, and this is when the most intimidating, official-looking documents start to show up. But just like the bank's own process, the legal system is also just that, a system. It has rules, and those rules can be understood and navigated. You'll likely get a document called a sklep ovisbørshvi, or a writ of execution. And man, it looks final. It feels like the end of the line. But all it really is a formal court order. It just gives the creditor the legal right to start the process of seizing assets to pay the debt. It's a serious document, for sure, but it's governed by very strict rules. And this is probably the most important mental shift you have to make. Getting this piece of paper is not a white flag of surrender. It is the official starting gun for a formal legal process. And a process has steps, it has timelines, and it has rules. Most importantly, within that process, you have clearly defined rights. The moment this paper arrives, the game moves onto a formal field where you can start to play by the rules too. So, what are these rights? Well, the law actually puts a protective shield around the things you need to survive. Things like social assistance, child support, they can't touch it. And this one is huge. They can't take your whole paycheck. A big chunk of the minimum wage is legally protected. They can't take the tools you need to do your job or the fridge you use to feed your family. This isn't just nice to know information. This is leverage. It defines the absolute limit of their power and gives you a secure foundation to negotiate from. Okay, so you understand their process, you're documenting absolutely everything, and you know your rights. Now, you can finally move from a defensive crouch to a proactive stance. You can be the one to formally propose a solution. Now, this is not about making a desperate phone call and hoping for the best. This is a structured 4-step legal move. First, you draft a formal written request. It's called a vloga. In that request, you propose a specific, realistic installment plan. This shows you're serious. Third, you formally ask for an odlogisversba. That's a deferment of enforcement while they consider your plan. And finally, the whole goal is to get a sporazum, a final written agreement that's legally binding on everybody.
Let's be absolutely clear about this. This proposal, it is not you begging for mercy. It is a business negotiation. You are using the formal language and procedures of the system to propose a new contract. This reframes the entire power dynamic. You are no longer the passive victim of a process. You are an active participant, negotiating a resolution.
Okay, so let's pull all of this together, because when you repeat these documented, structured actions over and over again, they stop being just individual tactics. They start to merge, to harden, and they become a coherent system. The entire system is really built on 4 pillars. 1, documentation. Absolute documentation. Everything in writing, no exceptions. 2, structure. You follow their procedures, you use formal templates. 3, repetition. You just do it consistently until it becomes second nature. This takes the emotion out of it. And 4, knowledge. You take the time to actually understand the bank's playbook and your own legal rights. There are no gurus here, no life hacks, just process and consistency.
And the real value of this system is where it came from. It wasn't designed in a classroom or some comfortable office. It was forged piece by piece right in the middle of all that chaos, under real financial pressure, while I was working exhausting shifts. It is not a theory. It's a practical machine for turning a confusing, chaotic mess into a series of predictable, manageable steps.
A strange thing happens when you live by a system like this. All that constant documentation, the structured letters, the legal research, it naturally starts to form a kind of manual. And for me, that manual eventually turned into a book, which really just wrote down the process you've just seen. The discipline from the system started to shape other parts of my life, creating this new identity built on structure and control. The book, the tools, they were never the goal. They were just the inevitable result of applying relentless order to a life that used to be defined by chaos. So here's the real takeaway. Control isn't a feeling that you wait for. It's a structure that you build, one documented step at a time. The blueprint is there, it's been pressure tested, and it works by replacing emotion with process. So the only real question left is, how can you start applying these principles, documentation, structure, and knowledge to bring some order to your own situation and regain control?